and I would like to introduce to you our speaker. Jane Zisk was born into a gardening family and was introduced to the wonder of growing things as a little girl, and her hands have been in the soil ever since. She is a proud member of the Master Gardener class of 2017. She serves as co-chair of community projects, is a member of the Speakers Bureau, and she's a contributor to the School Programs Committee. Thank you, Jane, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Earth-Friendly Solutions for Your Gardening Woes, the IPM approach. IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. But what does that mean? Well, if you look it up in books or look online, you'll find definitions that span about 1 to 2 paragraphs long. They typically have run-on sentences and some have very large words. It's a really dense read. You have to really read it carefully. So let's see if we can find an easier definition. So we're going to look at each word. Integrated. What does integrated mean? It means that you combine different and distinct piece parts to create a better whole. So you put things together that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't think to put together to make something better. What's a pest? Well, it's usually a problem of some kind, something that irritates you, right? In our home landscape, a pest can be an insect, like this Japanese beetle on a leaf. I find them on my rose bushes, eating the leaves. It could be a disease, like this powdery mildew on this leaf. It could be a weed, like poison ivy. Or it could be wildlife. And here in my yard in New Jersey, deer are the bane of my existence. But a pest is anything, any one of these things that interferes with planting, growing, or harvesting in your yard. What's management? Well, when we think about managing something, not just people, we have to understand that you need to know the details of what you're doing, and you also need to keep in mind the big picture. So back in the day when I was working in corporate America in telecommunications, I did a little stint as a project manager, and I had to understand budgets and timelines. I had to understand requirements and what the software people could and couldn't do. But then I also had to bear in mind that we were trying to produce a product on time, on budget, with high quality. So it's understanding the piece parts while also keeping in mind the big picture view to achieve the end goal of the project. And really the key is to prevent problems before they happen. Now, if we put this all together, that means that integrated pest management is combining techniques, tools, and approaches to prevent and handle pest problems in an environmentally sound way. And the key here is really prevention. At its core, integrated pest management is a common sense, science-based, meaning we're going to use techniques and products that have been proven to be effective. It's knowledge-based in that we're going to get to know our enemy, right? You can't battle an enemy unless you know it. So we're going to understand life cycles, and we're going to understand when things happen so that we can prevent and deal with them. And it's a holistic approach because it's back to that management idea of you take the total picture into account. And all of this is to manage pests in an acceptable level. And the key here is acceptable level. This doesn't mean that we're going to eradicate every insect and every deer, although sometimes I'd like to, or every disease that ever could happen. We just can't do that. We live in a world, right? We live in a world with all these things. So we're going to make sure we can bring them to an acceptable level, which is we're going to maybe tolerate some holes in our rose bush leaves, right? That maybe some Japanese beetles chew into. We're going to tolerate a few deer wandering through our yard. And as long as our plants can survive and thrive, it'll be okay. So in this talk, first of all, let me say that I cannot in this hour talk about every single plant and every single insect and every single disease. So I'm just kind of going to give you an overview with some more common examples. And I know that many of you are not in New Jersey, you're all across the states. So I'm going to focus on the solutions for New Jersey, but what you can do if you're in another state is contact the master gardeners in your area. And usually they work as part of your university's cooperative extension. So in this talk, we'll talk strategy and we'll talk approach. So the strategy of IPM is to use natural methods of pest control, right? Mother Nature seems to be able to manage a delicate balance in the wild. And we're going to try to take our cues from Mother Nature, and we're going to try to use the least toxic methods we can because they're the healthiest for us on our planet. We're going to use our knowledge of the pest and its life cycle. We're going to treat only when necessary, and we're going to start with the least toxic method. Now, let me take a moment and make the distinction between IPM and organic methods. Integrated pest management is not organic. Organic is actually kind of a subset of IPM because organic methods do not allow for any artificial fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, none of that. IPM allows for it, but we leave those as the last resort. Now, here's our process that we go through when we follow IPM approach. It's going to take me longer to describe it than it does to do it. So please just hang in there with me and you'll see where I'm going. At the top 12 o'clock position, we have prevent. Remember, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So it's easier to prevent a problem than to clean up and deal with it after it's already there. We're not going to be able to prevent everything because we don't know everything yet, right? If you're planting some flower that you've never planted before, you might not know all the things to do. But just remember, as Maya Angelou used to say, when we know better, we do better. So we look at gardening as a way to learn things. The next step is to monitor. Now, this sounds really oppressive, right? Really hard. But I have a friend whose dad would say, let us go perambulate the estate. And what he meant was, let's go outside and see what's happening in the yard and the garden. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to look and we're going to see. It's a great time to be outdoors, get some fresh air, and also to be excited about the little things that happen, right? When in this time of year, you see the daffodil leaves start to come up, it's like, yay, spring's not far away. Or when you plant that green bean seed and you see that first little shoot come up, it's just so exciting. Now, let me talk through this process also with an example. I have in my yard, outside my kitchen window, I have 4 euonymus bushes. Those are burning bushes. And one day I happened to be walking by the kitchen window and I noticed that the new leaves on the euonymus bushes were all curled in. And that's not typical. So I said, huh, to myself. And I went outside and I looked to see what was going on. And sure enough, I found some insects. So now I'm in the pest ID phase because I want to know what they are and what I can do about it. Well, I happen to know that they were aphids. And aphids have sucking mouth parts and they suck the juices out of the leaves. So I also happened to see that there were these funny little things that I knew were lady beetle larvae. And I have some pictures of them later on to show you. They are kind of funny looking. But I happen to know that lady beetle larvae have voracious appetites, and they particularly like aphids. So I thought, well, that's pretty good. So now I'm down to assess. And in the assessment phase, we assess not only the severity of the infestation, but we assess the things that we can do about it. So since I knew that ladybug larvae eat aphids, and I saw there were a fair amount of ladybug larvae in relation to the aphids, what I decided to do was nothing. I was going to let Mother Nature take its course, and doing nothing is an absolutely valid implementation approach. But I was going to go back in a few days and double check and see how well that worked. So I did go back in a few days, and I saw because I was in monitoring again, right? I saw that there were still aphids, but there were no lady beetle larvae left, and there were no adult lady beetles. So now there was nothing there to eat the aphids. There was no predator. There was nothing else going on. So now I'm back to assess, saying, now what should I do? Well, I know that I can take a strong spray of water and I can shoot those aphids off the plant and they won't bother it anymore. But because of the way my house is set up and where the spigot is, it was all the way around the side of the house. I was really too lazy to do that because it would require me dragging 200 feet of hose around. And I didn't want to do that. So I did the next best thing. I went and got my pruners and I got a bucket of soapy water. And I went back to the burning bushes and I clipped off the top, 7 or 8 inches of the branches that had the aphids in the leaves. And I dunked those branches in the soapy water to kill the aphids. I was able to do this because I also happen to know that burning bushes just grow prolifically, so it wasn't going to hurt the bush. So that's what I did. And while I was there, I checked the other plants. They didn't have that many aphids, but while I was there and I had the bucket, I just trimmed everything. And then I stood back and said, how does that look? And I managed to get rid of probably all, but definitely most of the aphids. I did it without having to spray anything. And in the meantime, I also gave my burning bushes a nice little haircut, so they look nice. So my evaluation was success. I'm done. And there you go. So this is our process. Now, keep in mind that you're going to be in different phases of this process with different parts of your yard and different plants and trees, and that's okay. This is really like a common sense approach, right? See what there is, decide what to do, implement it, and evaluate. So you can see that in that example, I used no chemicals at all. So one of the benefits of IPM is when you bring together these different pest management strategies and approaches, you use fewer products. And of the ones that you use less of them because you're using them at the exact right time that you can do the most good at managing the pest, whether it be disease or an insect or whatever. Since we're not buying a lot of things, we're saving money, which is great. And since we're not using a lot of chemicals, we're making the planet healthier for people and the pets and our children. And we also foster clean water supplies in that we're not going to fertilize our lawn if it doesn't need it. So the fertilizers won't run off into our water. We also reduce pesticide resistance because we're not overusing a pesticide and then having the insects evolve to be resistant to that pesticide, right? Much like antibiotics in people, right? So we reduce our need to come up with more and more toxic options, which is a good thing. And overall, IPM promotes healthy plants. And just like when we have a good amount of sleep and we're well rested and we have good nutrition, our immune system can fend off diseases more easily. So it is with our plants. They can better withstand any insect or disease pests if they're healthy and vigorous. Are there any questions so far?
Jane, I just want to mention or reiterate what you said, that
Mhm.
this isn't, here's my pest, what to do about it. It's not a specific talk like that.
Right.
We do have the Rutgers fact sheet link on your handout, and there's a lot of fact sheets there on specific pests that people can refer to. That's like a whole nother talk. But I think your talk's going to give people the tools to decide what to do about a pest. So just please keep that in mind, because we could get inundated on the Q&A with specific questions, and that's not really what this talk is about.
Yes,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Diane. That's true.
Sure.
And if you do have specific questions, contact your master gardeners. They can help you. So here are the 4 control methods that we can use to manage our pests to an acceptable level. The top left is cultural controls, and these are things that have to do with planting and nurturing and growing all of your plants in your yard and your trees and your lawn. These are completely non-toxic. On the top right are the mechanical and physical methods. These are fences and things, barrier methods to keep the pests away from your plants. They're also non-toxic. On the bottom left, we have biological controls. And this is where we use other organisms to control and manage pests in our home landscape. And then finally, on the bottom right, we have our chemical controls, our herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. Anything that has the suffix CIDE, side, means it's going to kill it. And so here's where we have some of the more toxic options to use, all right? But we try to do the chemical warfare as a last resort. So I'm going to go through each of the 4 of these, and I'll stop for questions after each section. The cultural section is going to be the longest, and that has the most information because that's where we prevent, and prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? An ounce of prevention. So here are our cultural control strategy. We're going to use sound horticultural practices to prevent pest outbreaks, and to make your garden and home landscape unattractive and inhospitable to pests. So if some pests likes the shady, damp area, we're going to bring in sunshine and dry it out, right? So the pest doesn't want to live there. And overall, we're going to keep our plants healthy and vigorous so they can fend off any pests. And here are some, well, this is cute. I found this cartoon and I hope you find it tickled my funny bone. So here's the lady saying he's found a brilliant new way of scaring off garden pests. Now, I don't do this method, and I don't know if you want to either, but I just thought it was cute. So these approaches are the things that we can do, okay, to prevent problems. The first, and you always hear the master gardeners say this, is to get a soil test, because we want to make sure that our soil is the healthiest and the most fertile that we can provide for our plants, because that's where the plants live, right? And all of the links that you'll see in this talk are in your handout. So get a soil test. Here in Monmouth County, it's really easy, really cheap, about $20, and it's well worth it. You'll get a report, a detailed report that tells you what's in your soil now, what you need to do to amend it, how much to use, when to put it down. It's really fabulous. And I would get a soil test I get mine like every 3 years, 4 years. We're also going to make sure we plant the right plant in the right place. And we're going to group our plants with similar requirements together. So when we have vegetables and flowers that all love direct sun and full sunlight, we're going to put them together, right? Because you don't want to plant a plant that wants full sun with your shady plants because it won't thrive. And you don't want to put your shady plants in full sun because they won't thrive. The same is true with water requirements. If you have something that likes to be dry, like lavender, you don't put it near something that wants to be watered more often, like a Siberian iris, for instance. And soil pH is critical. So we want to have the acid-loving plants like rhododendron and azalea and blueberries all planted together so that we can give them the soil pH they want without harming our vegetables and flowers that might like a more neutral pH. So that's how your soil test really comes in handy too, so that you know you've got your soil just right for everything that you need to plant. We're also going to be careful of our plant selection. We're going to choose native plants because they've evolved along with pollinators to thrive in this environment. So here in New Jersey are 2 sources of lists of plants for natives, the Native Plant Society of New Jersey and Jersey Friendly Yards. And I'm sure in all your other states you can get similar kinds of lists from your cooperative extension. We're also going to choose pest-resistant varieties. And here I'm thinking mostly of tomatoes, right? You think of Jersey tomatoes. But they really have a lot of diseases like Fusarium wilt and Verticillium wilt and blight. So if you can choose disease-resistant varieties, you have some prevention there, and that helps. And in my yard, I really need deer-resistant varieties of all kinds of plants. And Rutgers has a deer-resistant plant database. It's searchable. which is really very helpful. Now, deer resistant does not mean that it repels them. If deer are hungry, they will eat just about anything, but it helps if you have deer resistant plants. Now we're going to allow sufficient space for our plants to grow. So for vegetables and flowers, this is important because it has, you need to promote good airflow to help fend off diseases like this picture in the top left of powdery mildew. That's a fungal disease. And so we need good airflow through the leaves and the foliage to make sure that we can prevent fungal diseases. Now with trees and shrubs, we have to make sure that we allow sufficient space for the adult tree, the mature tree. This picture on the bottom right, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is a Betula nigra. It's a river birch that was planted too close to my house. This is my house. When I moved in, it was already there. Now, if you can see, right, you can see there's this white line, that's the downspout, and this is the very corner of my house. I'm about 5'7", so I have a pretty good wingspan from fingertip to fingertip, but not that big. And I was able to touch the corner of my house, the brick, and touch the bark of the tree without straightening my elbows. And that is way too close to the house. And the picture on the bottom left shows you how tall it is. This red line across the top, that's the roof line roughly of my house. It's a 2-story house. And that tree was way above it. I have an acre. Anywhere you stood on my property, you could see that tree. So it was way too tall, way too close. And the other problem with that is that the roots could compromise my foundation. And that's a real problem. And also, since it's close to the house, all of the roots would be out in that grassy area. So if ever a big storm came, like Superstorm Sandy that we had, this tree was in danger of falling down. Now, luckily, it would uproot toward the yard and not on top of my house, but it was still not a good thing to have there. We had to take it down, and I was really upset. I don't like to take down healthy trees, but I had to in that point. So when you're planting a tree and you get this cute little seedling, really keep in mind, check the mature height of every plant, the mature width, so that you can plan much better and everything will grow much nicer. It's also a good idea to plant flowers that attract beneficial insects, particularly in your vegetable garden, right? Because not only do they attract the insects, but they add beauty. Now, these are just a few. There are many, many more. But going from the top right, we have Sweet Alyssum, which the bees love. And they come in purple and white, and they self-seed. They're really nice. Going down clockwise, we have Cosmos. They grow very tall. They come in all sorts of different colors, and they're absolutely beautiful. In the middle bottom here is lavender. And the bees and pollinators absolutely love it. When I lived in my old house, there was a little boy next door, and I had lavender along the driveway, and it was just buzzing with bees. And he came over and said, "How can you live like this?" But he was afraid of bees. It was really cute. But they really do attract a lot of pollinators. Then on the bottom left, we have marigolds. And look, there's even a butterfly there to prove my point. These are also nice to plant near your tomatoes because if you are plagued with tomato hornworms, they'll go on to the marigolds, or the marigolds will help keep them away. And the top left are zinnia, and zinnia come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors. They're just amazing. So really consider interplanting flowers with your vegetables. We also can plant herbs that attract beneficial insects, whether you use them for cooking or eating or not. They're really very fragrant, and beneficials love them. And again, going clockwise, on the top right, we have cilantro, which is really nice, and salsa. We have our dill, which it self-seeds because it has this big umbel of seeds, and the pollinators love it. Down on the bottom here, we have thyme, and then over on the bottom left are our chives. And look, they look like a pretty flower to themselves, and you can eat them. And then our basil. So think about planting herbs, and you can even plant herbs among your flowers. We're also going to employ proper mulching techniques. Mulch keeps the soil moist so that the tree doesn't dry out. It discourages weeds because it blocks sunlight, and it protects tree trunks from lawn equipment. Now, my husband mows our lawn, which is very nice, but he is a bull in a china shop when it comes to moving that lawnmower around. I can't tell you how many things he has actually mown over that it makes me crazy. So I put big mulch barriers around my tree trunks, but you have to do it the right way. You want a donut, like this picture on the bottom left. Can you see around the trunk? There's a gap. You can see the soil. And that's so that we don't end up with this volcano like on the bottom right that I see everywhere, and it just makes me crazy. This happens to be a picture of a much smaller volcano than I usually see. The problem with the volcano is you're suffocating the tree, because right at the root flare, that's where the tree breathes. And also, if you have this big volcano, you're attracting pests to live in that area. So it's just not a good idea. Now, also, if you use natural mulch, not dyed mulch, but naturally colored mulch, it decomposes and provides extra nutrients to the soil. So remember, donut, but not volcano. And we're going to employ proper watering of our plants. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm thirsty, I don't take a shower. I drink water because that gets it to my digestive system where my body can use it. And you know what? There was a saying back in the 70s, I'm dating myself, but that plants are people too. So plants don't want to be showered. They want to drink water. So we're going to water at the roots. This helps keep water off of the foliage. So we help stave off fungal diseases and molds. And it makes sure that the water gets to the roots where the plants need it. And we can do this with soaker hoses, like this picture on the bottom left. And the middle picture shows you how pliable and flexible the soaker hoses are. You can get them right next to the plant where the roots need the water. You can hook them up to a timer so that it's easy to turn on and off. But what you don't want to do, and here's the big red circle with the X through it, you don't want to stick your thumb in the hose and shoot the water, right? Because you're giving them a shower. The other thing is that when you water this way from above, even with a nozzle, you'd be surprised how little water actually gets down into the soil. So if you use a nozzle or a watering can, make sure you get down to the roots. Now here's lawn watering. There are so many, I don't know, but it makes me crazy in rainy days when I see automatic sprinkler systems watering. You're wasting water. Please, please, when it rains, turn off your sprinklers. But we're going to water our lawn early in the morning. Again, remember, grass is a plant, and we want to keep those leaves dry. We don't want them moist because that will encourage diseases. We want to water deeply to encourage long roots so that it can survive a drought. So that means we're going to water less frequently, not every day, but we're going to water for a longer period of time. So you water maybe 3 times a week so that you get an inch of water in the ground. And we're going to keep our flowers and our vegetables and our shrubs away from automatic sprinklers, again, to make sure that foliage is dry. So this thumbs up picture on the bottom left, that's good watering of the lawn, right? Early morning, I'm going to assume this is early morning. And also the water pressure is better early in the morning. So you get a bigger bang for your buck. The picture on the bottom right with the thumbs down, why do I consider that a bad thing? Well, there are flowers right there in the middle getting a heck of a lot of water. And there's a shrub right there on the right-hand side. This is good for the lawn, but not for the shrubs. We find on our helpline that most of the problems when people call in for their trees and their shrubs, most of the problems are due to improper watering, too much water. Now, if you're growing vegetables, one of the cultural controls is to rotate your crops, because some insects and diseases overwinter in the soil. So if you have vegetables from the same family planted in the same spot every year, you're going to have it's possible to have a greater insect and disease problem. The ideal rotation period is 3 to 4 years. And so you see these 4 raised beds, you want to cycle them around. Now I know this is not always possible, but perhaps with the use of container gardening, you can do this more easily. What I do in my raised bed garden is about every 4 or 5 years, I dig out, oh, where did you see? I just disappeared. Oh, there we are. Sorry. I don't know what happened. So what I do in my garden is I'll dig out the top foot or so of soil, and I'll use that to refresh some of my flower beds, and I'll order new topsoil from a reputable garden center for my raised beds. That's an idea. We're also going to use good sanitation practices, and there are several of these to use. The first is to clean and sanitize your tools and even your shoes or your gloves to avoid spreading disease. You can do this by washing your tools with 1 part bleach and 4 parts water, or you can wipe with alcohol, whether you use alcohol swabs or you have a rag with some alcohol or some cotton rounds like is shown in the bottom left-hand picture. But we want to think about all of our tools, not just our pruners. So even things that we dig with, things that we cut with, any of these things. And you know what? The wintertime is a good time to do this because we're not using them, and you can oil your tools as well. Now, ideally, particularly with tomatoes that are susceptible to a lot of diseases, you want to wipe off your pruners every time you move to another plant. Now, I know it sounds a little onerous, but you know what? I found that I tend to kneel and crouch down to prune my tomatoes. So as I'm getting up to go to the next one, I wipe off my pruners and I do it that way. That's just an idea. We're going to discard any disease or pest-infested vegetation. And this, I just think, is a very interesting example because it's not obvious what's happening here. This is a fungus called Gymnosporangium juniperi virginiana. Anyway, it's cedar apple rust. And it's called cedar apple rust because it takes 2 host trees for this fungus to spread. So this picture on the bottom left is on the red cedar tree. And you can see inside here is like this brownish colored ball. That's called a gall, G-A-L-L. And out of this gall are these orange tentacle things. This is the fungus growing. And this is where the spores are coming out. This happens round about March in the spring. The gall will sprout these orange tentacles. And the wind takes the spores and carries it. It can carry it up to a mile and a half away. And if it falls on an apple leaf, like this leaf on the right, and the spore can then grow, get inside the leaf, you find these funny colored spots. They're yellow in the middle, sometimes with black, and what looks like kind of orangey is a rusty colored spot. That's the apple rust. So these leaves are now infected. Once you see this on the apple leaf, it's too late to do anything. You have to wait till the following spring. But here's what happens next. By the end of the summer, this picture on the bottom left is the apple leaf, and you see the fungus is growing and producing spores. What happens? The wind carries the spores back to the red cedar tree, and in the springtime, the following spring, this is a 2-year cycle, this gall develops and the whole process starts over again. Now, I find this very interesting because you may not see the other host tree. I have a crab apple and I was finding these rust spots and I was like, what in heaven's name is this? I have no idea where the red cedar tree is. I've walked around, I've driven around, I've bicycled around, don't know where it is. But what you do then the following spring, if you know you have this, you can spray your apple leaves in the spring when the buds start opening, the flower buds. You can spray with a fungicide, and you'd have to spray every 7 days until the petals of the flowers fall off. And that way you can treat the fungus on your apple tree. For the red cedar tree, in the springtime, you can look for these galls, and then you can cut them off, destroy them, and throw them out. In the fall, when you see this rust on your apple leaves, you make sure that you gather them all up and you throw them out. You don't compost your leaves, you don't compost the gall, you don't compost any of this, you throw it all away. We're also going to discard anything that has had a vine borer in it. So the picture on the left is a bearded iris and its rhizome, and there's the borer circled in the blue circle. What happens is a moth comes and lays its egg on the rhizome. The egg hatches, and the larva gets in and eats the tissue of the rhizome, because that's stem tissue. It's a bearded iris is not a bulb or a tuber, it's a stem tissue. The picture on the right is a squash vine borer. Now you can see the squash vine probably had other issues too, because it's got all that white powdery mildew on it. But there's the vine borer, and it eats that stem out and kills the plant as well. So if ever you see your squash, and sometimes even cucumbers, where it was healthy yesterday and today it's starting to look kind of wilty, you can sort of go down and squish the stem until you find the vine borer. I'm sure you'll see it. But you kill the borer and you throw out all that vegetation. The same is true with the iris. Now, when we have fall cleanup, I know everybody, oh, my neighbor, I have a neighbor that has landscapers come, and there will be 3 leaf blowers blowing all day. I can't figure out what in heaven's name they're blowing away. But when it comes to fall, please go easy on the fall cleanup. This picture on the bottom left is near the front of my house. And I would actually leave this like this, because beneficial insects overwinter in all of that leaf litter. Just leave it there. And come springtime, oh, the other thing I leave too is the picture on the right. These were echinacea, purple cone flowers. And the flowers have obviously died back and the stems are done. But I leave this here because the seeds are very nutritious for, gosh, what is the word I'm looking for? Help me out. Who eats these leaves, Diane? Who eats these seeds? I can't. I've lost.
Goldfinch, the goldfinch.
Thank you, the finches.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I was answering a question. I got lost.
I had Swiss cheese brain for a minute there. The finches love the purple coneflower seeds, so we leave the seeds for them. And also in the wintertime when it snows, it's actually kind of nice when the snow is on there. Now come springtime, I know in March, I am so itchy to get out there and garden, but I have to hold back, because if I don't want to be out at night when the temperatures are not above 50 degrees, neither do the beneficial insects. So we want to leave the leaves there until we know that the nights are reliably above 50 degrees round about in April, so that all the beneficial insects have a chance to come out, and we're not disturbing their habitat. Oh, I apologize for that. That's funny. We're also going to resist monoculture. And monoculture is when you plant a whole bunch of the same thing in the same single area. Now, this is a picture in my backyard. It's kind of the best example I could find of monoculture in my yard. Thank goodness. These are a line of arborvitae, and I see this all over the place in my neighborhood. They are a great visual barrier, right? This is the fence between my yard and my neighbor's yard. However, the problem is, if, let's say that the arborvitae on the extreme right, next to that blue spruce, if that got a disease or an insect infestation, what would happen? It would go through all of them like wildfire. All right. So what we really want to do is strive for diversity in the plantings in our landscape, the landscape of our yard, so that we can have a diverse environment the pest, if a pest hits one tree or shrub, it won't hit any others. And it's just a good way to have a good ecosystem for all of our beneficials. All right, are there any other questions?
Yeah, Jane, there's a couple good questions. Going
Okay.
back to mulch.
Yes.
Do you know if the dyed mulch harms trees and other plants versus natural non-dyed mulch?
Well, the dyed mulch, what happens? The dye leaches into the soil. So I would say it's not a good thing. It's certainly not organic.
It's not organic, but I don't think it's going to harm anything.
I don't know.
But it
I avoid.
preferably, yeah,
I avoid.
it's still, yeah,
You just want to be as close to Mother Nature as you can be. And in the forest, there is no red or black mulch.
right. Good point.
Yeah.
How thick can you mulch under a tree so it doesn't smother the roots?
Oh, only just a couple of inches, 2 to 3 would be sufficient.
Yeah, I'd say no
That,
more than
no
that.
volcano. Right.
And then going back to watering, how many inches of water do you want per watering session? I know it's an inch per week.
Inch per week. So you have to see how much it's rained. If it rains, you
Mhm.
don't have to water. And so you just have to, you can get a
Rain
water,
gauge.
yeah, rain gauge. Thank you.
That's
I'm
what they
having
would
trouble
say.
with my words today. A rain gauge, so you can see how much rain has come.
Yeah.
And
And
with water, you can use that. If you don't have a rain gauge, you can put a little container outside when the sprinklers are on and see how much water you get.
yeah.
It will
And
vary.
I I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say it will vary depending on your sprinkler system, how it's set up, what kind of sprinkler you use. So, I can't really say exactly.
I think the idea is to water as infrequently as possible. So if we haven't had rain and you can only water, you want to put down 1 inch a week, preferably at one time, maybe two if you have more of a sandy soil because it leaches out more quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, oh wait, with monoculture, does distance reduce problems? I'm
It
not sure.
does.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course it does, because you have some space.
Yep.
Now, with a fungal spore disease, no, the distance has to be really far. But in your yard, yes, you want some distance. Absolutely.
All right. I think everything else. Oh, how about pine needles? They're good mulch, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And leaves and shredded leaves. We'll get to that too.
Okay. Everything else is pretty specific. I can handle then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now on to physical controls. The strategy here is to either remove the pest, to block the pest out, or to trap it and throw it out, get rid of it, kill it. So our approaches are to remove the pest, we can hand pick insects. So the picture on the bottom left is scraping the spotted lanternfly egg masses into a bag with a little alcohol or something. We squish that all up and throw it out. So we destroy the egg mass. If it's an adult, like Japanese beetles in the picture on the right, we hand pick them and drop them into soapy water to kill them and then throw that out. If, like me, you have a rose bush that has a lot of Japanese beetles on it, or some kind of tree that has a lot of an insect, you can lay down a tarp or a sheet or something light colored and kind of shake the tree a little and shake the beetles out and then get them into soapy water. You can use, as I had said in my example with the aphids on my burning bush, you can use a strong spray of water to knock insects off, whether it be aphids or mites or anything like that. And then we can hand pull or till weeds. And this picture on the bottom right is a hori knife. This is my absolute favorite gardening tool. It's got a point that helps me dig really deeply. It's got a little serrated edge if I have to cut some grass or something. And it just fits in my hand really nice. I weed with this all the time. So I'm right-handed. I'll have the hori knife. I dig with my right hand and I pull the weeds out with my left hand. So this is the only time if you have aphids or something that you would give your plants a shower. Okay, I know I said don't shower them, but this is the only time because you're shooting the insects off of the plant. And you'd have to make sure that you get the underside of leaves, right? Think of a hot summer day. Where do you want to be? I want to be in the shade sipping a lemonade. So the insects don't want to be out in the sun either. They hide underneath the leaves. So a lot of times if you're spraying water or anything else, check the undersides of the leaves. Make sure you get those. We can remove the pests. Now here's my burning bush example. You see how the leaves were all curled in that picture on the left? And on the right, that's the funny looking little lady beetle larva. Isn't that cute? So you know that I looked for it. I let the lady beetles try to eat the aphids. That wasn't sufficient. So I pruned the branches and soaked them in a bucket of soapy water. And here's another example of a pest we can easily remove, the Colorado potato beetle. Um, when it lays the eggs on the leaves of the potato plant, they really stand out because they're this brilliant orange on a green leaf. So what you do is you can remove the leaf or rip that part of the leaf off, squish all the eggs, throw them out. This is picture on the right is the adult Colorado potato beetle. If you see one, and if you can catch it, they're kind of quick, but if you can catch it because they fly, drop it into soapy water or tap the leaf and have it fall down into some soapy water. But I find that taking care of the eggs really is the easiest and the best way to handle this. Here are tent caterpillars. I know to look for tent caterpillars in my one particular tree the first weekend of May. That's when I see them. And this is a picture on the left of the tent caterpillar. It's this little spiny thing. And on the right is the picture of the tent that it creates. It likes to sit in the notch of trees to build its tent around. And what happens is the caterpillars come out in the daytime and they eat the tree leaves, and then they go back in the tent at night for protection from predators. Or if ever they think there are predators around, they run back into their tent. So if the branch is low enough to reach, you can prune the branch, soak it in a bucket of soapy water to kill the caterpillars, and then throw it out. Or what I did one year was I thought, gee, I know they go and hide in the tent and that's their protection. I wonder if I spray it with a strong spray of water and destroy the tent, if that will take care of the caterpillars. And it did seem to do that. And so I didn't even have to buy any chemicals. It was high up in the tree. I sprayed it with water and I didn't have a problem anymore. Now here's our barrier methods. The picture on the left, if you have a fenced-in yard, you can keep out deer and rabbits and other animals. I don't have a fenced-in backyard, so this picture on the right is a picture of my garden. I have deer and rabbits and skunk and squirrels and chipmunks and lions and tigers and bears. So I have everything. So we put up a 5-foot high fence. You can't see the fencing. There's deer fencing that goes up as high as these posts. These are 4x4 posts that we sunk down into the ground below the frost level. We dug a trench and I put hardware cloth down 3 feet to help prevent groundhogs from burrowing up and under and up into the garden, I mean. And then I put 5 foot of deer fencing up. So that fences my entire garden. Now you can fence specific plants and trees. So this picture on the left is inside my vegetable garden. And what's in the foreground here is my raised bed with strawberry plants. So I built this little PVC cage and I covered it in deer netting and I just set it over the whole raised bed. I weigh down the edges of the deer netting with some scrap pieces of lumber. And when I want to pick my strawberries, I just lift it off. In the background here, I built a big cube to cover my blueberries. And it doesn't show up in this picture, but that's completely covered in deer netting too. And I used reusable zip ties so that I can just untie some of the zip ties on the top and the side, make a little doorway for myself, and I can go in and harvest my blueberries. Because I forgot, that, there can be aerial attacks. So the birds come and eat the berries before I can pick them. Excuse me. The picture on the right is my redbud tree in the front yard. Now you see the trunk is green because I had to cover it with a plastic tube because the deer were coming and rubbing, the bucks were rubbing their antlers on the bark to get the velvet off of their antlers. So I covered it in the plastic so that they wouldn't kill my tree. But then I found that because this was a young tree, they were eating the leaves and the branches. So I put that whole barrier around it so that they couldn't reach it. So sometimes you have to be creative in how you keep the animals away from your plantings. Another thing you can use to prevent insects from getting to your plants is a floating row cover. This is a picture on the left. Floating row cover is a very thin fabric. It lets through water and it lets through sunlight, but it prevents any moths from coming and laying eggs on any of your plants. So this will help prevent vine borers. It will help prevent any other kind of caterpillar getting to your plants. The pictures in the middle and on the right are of cutworms. These are worms that live in the soil, not very far, not too deeply in the soil, but they come up mostly at night and they eat just the very bottom part of your plant so it falls over dead. And then they go back in the ground. So the way to get around that is you put a little cuff around your seedlings. You can cut the bottom off of a paper cup. I used to take old file folders, like manila folders, and I would cut them into strips and staple them into a cylinder and put that down. And that way the cutworm won't get to your plant. If it does happen to, you can dig around a little bit around the plant, and I'm sure you'll find the cutworm curled up like that. You can squash it and get rid of it. Another way to protect your plants is to use diatomaceous earth. This is a powder. It's actually fossilized remains. These are tiny organisms that lived in bodies of water. And what this does is it dries out the pest's exoskeleton, which is its outer skin. So it dries it out. And also, if it tries to cross it, there are sharp edges that cut into it and it speeds up the whole process. Now, you do want to be careful because this is like a powdery dust. You don't want to breathe it in. You don't want to put it down on a windy day because it'll blow all over the place. And you don't want to use it indoors. So don't use this on any houseplants. But you can use it out of doors. And here on the left are pictures, 2 examples. Now, the Master Gardeners, we do not promote any particular product, but I just wanted to show you how it's packaged so if you go to look for it, you know what to look for. Here we're going to talk about mulch again, just because it's a barrier against the weeds and the weed whackers and lawnmowers. And here for the trees, use natural shredded bark because it's a natural material. It's not dyed. A donut, not volcano. 3 to 4 inches or 2 to 3 inches is sufficient. But in the vegetable garden, you can use that mulch, but actually I find that 1 or 2 inches of shredded leaves or straw is sufficient. So this way in the fall, I keep all the leaves. My husband zips them over with the lawnmower. I store them. And in the summertime, I use them as mulch in vegetable and even in my flower beds. And I use them in my compost for my browns. We can also handle insects with passive traps. And a passive trap is one that takes advantage of the insect's natural living instincts, its natural movement. So the picture on the left is a spotted lanternfly trap, which I think many folks in New Jersey are familiar with. The spotted lanternfly nymphs and even the adults climb. They just want to climb up. Right? That's their natural instinct. So we have this netting that we attach to the tree and they climb up in the netting and then they climb up and they can go right into this bag. And the bag has some alcohol or sanitizer in it. And we collect up, and when that bag is full, we detach the bag, squish everything in there, make sure it's dead, throw it out, put a new bag on. No chemicals, nothing. These are easy to make, and you can also find them, you can buy them easily too. Another way to deal with climbing insects is this middle picture with a sticky trap. A sticky tape trap is nice, but it traps everything, including beneficial insects and possibly even birds. So if you use sticky tape as a trap, please do cover it with some kind of netting so that no birds will get in there and other flying insects won't. Or you can cover it like this picture on the right. But you see how the sticky trap is very effective. The other kind of trap is a baited trap. This is where we lure the insect or the pest in. So beer traps are very easy and effective against slugs. So you put either a shallow plate or a little shallow bowl in the ground. You pour some beer in. You can use cheap old beer. They don't have refined palates. They'll go to any beer and they'll crawl in there and they'll die. Now, these Japanese beetle traps, they used to be very popular, and they use a pheromone. It's almost like a big piece of stiff fabric that the pheromone is on, and it gets placed in that yellow part, the top part of the trap. And the idea was that the Japanese beetles would be attracted to it, they'd fall into the green part, and they wouldn't be able to get out, and they would die. However, research, because IPM is science-based, right? Research has shown that, yes, it is very effective in attracting Japanese beetles, but only 75% get trapped. Now, that sounds like a large amount, but if you think, you're attracting all these Japanese beetles every day, you're not managing to an acceptable level. It resulted in increased plant damage. So I would recommend that you stay away from these, and better to hand pick the adults off of your plants. Are there any questions about physical barriers? Physical control?
Somebody's asking, will baited traps catch grubs? No, they're just for the adults, right?
Yes, those baited traps are just for the adults because it's up in the open air. Grubs live down under the soil.
Right. So she's saying she has them in her lawn and garden and they crawl up into her very large containers, but I don't think they do that. I think the beetles are laying the eggs in the
Yes.
surface of her containers, and that's how she's getting them in there.
Yes,
Because the grubs
can't
really stay
crawl.
underground.
Right, they stay underground.
Yeah, until they become beetles.
We'll talk about
somebody,
grubs in the next section.
Great. Somebody wanted to know where you and how you store your leaves from the fall to use in the spring in your vegetable garden.
Oh, that's a great question. Here's a picture of my garden. You can't quite see it, but behind the garden, I have large cylinders of hardware, steel, the steel mesh, right? And so I just dump them right in there. Now, this particular year, if you can see this blue in the back here, I think I had a pile that I just threw a tarp over. So you don't have to be fussy about it. Just put them somewhere in a pile or in a container that so that the wind doesn't blow them away, right? I want to hold them in my yard.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So our next control is biological control. The strategy here is to use a living organism to control a pest population, and pests can be prey. So we're going to, and now I'm going to get very alliterative here. We're going to enlist the help of predators, parasites, and pathogens to keep our pest population in check. And let's go through each of these. So the approach is with predators, we're going to have a diverse environment in our backyard landscape to attract birds, so they'll nest in the trees, because birds eat caterpillars and all sorts of insect larvae, particularly, and this is Mother Nature, the beauty of Mother Nature, the caterpillars happen to be most prevalent at the time that the baby birds are born, or hatch. So just when the adult birds are looking for food for their young, that's when all the caterpillars are around. So it's really perfect. Bats Bats are another great predator. They eat up to half their weight in insects every night. Every night. I cannot imagine eating half my weight in anything, even things I love like chocolate or ice cream, but they do that every night. So I know people think bats are creepy, but really they're your friends. Frogs and toads can eat up to 15,000 insects in one growing season. That's just phenomenal. Spiders, we know with their webs, they wait and they eat all sorts of things, including spotted lanternflies. And then we have our other insects like the praying mantis and the lady beetle. And again, there's the picture of the lady beetle feasting on aphids and the lady beetle larva. They are not picky about what they eat. So the praying mantis will eat pollinators, but you know, it's kind of a balancing act, right? We have our parasites, and here are just two examples. We have the braconid wasps, and that's a picture of them on the top left. They lay their eggs on tomato hornworms. And if you look at the picture on the right, that's what a tomato hornworm looks like. Those white things that look like little tic tacs, those are actually the wasp eggs. And the eggs hatch and the larvae gets under the skin and it eats the hornworm from the inside out. So if you see a tomato hornworm on your tomatoes or in your garden, and it has these white things that look like Tic Tacs on it, leave it alone. Don't kill it because you want that generation of wasps to survive. All right. And then on the bottom, we have the Trisulcus wasp. Now look at this guy. He's laying his eggs on these egg cases, and they are stink bug eggs. So this wasp goes and lays its eggs there, and the picture on the bottom right is the empty cases of the stink bug eggs because the wasp larvae ate them all and then came out of the egg. How cool is that? Now we have pathogens. These are microscopic disease-causing organisms, and examples are bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoa, and nematodes. Now what happens is they spread diseases that results in either a reduction in growth or development of the host, which means it cannot produce, it cannot reproduce. So that next generation is obliterated, right? The disease can also cause death. Most of these pathogens are applied as sprays, dusts, or granules. And they're considered non-toxic to humans and pets because we are not biologically closely related to the target hosts of these pathogens. Now here's an example that's probably the most well-known, and it's Bacillus thuringiensis, BT for short. BT is naturally found in the soil, and it actually supports plant growth. It must be eaten by the pest to be effective because it attacks the pest's digestive system, and it takes 2 to 5 days to starve the pest. So if you put down BT and you still see your pest wandering around, wait 2 to 5 days and the thing will die. It's toxic to insect larvae that eat sprayed foliage. So you can spray BT on the foliage and wait for the pest to come and eat it. It's not helpful or effective on adults because the adults are not eating the foliage, only the larvae are, the caterpillars. Now you have to apply this after egg hatch, and it's best when the larvae are young. Why? Because when they're young, they're actively feeding to grow, to get ready to become adults. But once they get to a certain stage, they stop feeding because now they're going to concentrate on going to the next phase. So you want to, here's where monitoring really comes in handy. You want to know when the eggs hatch if you're going to use BT, because there's no need to put it on your leaves if you don't have any eggs. BT has a short half-life, which means that it decays and breaks down in the sun and heavy rain. So we would apply it early in the morning or late in the evening to avoid the sun, and we'd have to reapply after a heavy rain. So you want to watch the weather when you're going to apply BT. And when you mix it up, you want to use it within 12 hours so it's at its most potent. There are several different strains, and each strain is somewhat pest specific. So BT is considered a narrow spectrum control, not broad. Broad spectrum would be it kills just about anything, but narrow spectrum is that it's specific to the biology of that pest. Now, when we use anything, any product, we're going to read the product label so that we know exactly what we're buying, particularly with BT, with the various strains. We're going to follow all label directions because the label is the law. There's actually a law that says you have to apply things exactly as it says on the label. So here is, you can take a screenshot of this. It's also in your handout. Here's a list of the various strains of BT and which larvae they're most effective on. So BTI is for mosquitoes, fungus gnats, and black fly. And you can go down the list and see what these all work on. You can see that BTK is effective for very many things, including tomato hornworms. But what I do for tomato hornworms, again, to avoid the biological controls or any kind of chemical, is I just plant parsley next to my tomatoes, and I can see the hornworms on the parsley much more easily, and I can pick them off. So
Jane,
yes.
there was a clarification on the hornworm parasitoid wasp.
Okay.
That the white things on them are cocoons, they're not eggs, because the adult she lays
yeah.
the eggs on them and they so emerge and they're pupating.
Yeah. Okay,
so that was just a clarification. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. But still, if you see them, no matter what they are, eggs or cocoons, you don't touch the hornworm, you let it do its job. All right, now, the mosquito dunks that we use in standing water, that's actually BT as well. It's the BTI. And this is the cake. It's like a donut-shaped cake that you can place in any standing water, and it'll kill mosquito and black fly larvae, which means you eradicate that generation. It's harmless to other living things. And then here's where we're talking about our Japanese beetle grubs with the milky spore. The grubs, milky spore is the powder that you put down in your lawn, and it's Japanese beetle grub specific. That's all it kills is the Japanese beetle grub. All right, so you must apply it, obviously, when grubs are present in the soil and close to the surface. Excuse me. Grubs do move up and down in the soil depending on the time of year. So mid to late summer, when the soil is in the temperature range of 60 to 70 degrees, the grubs are closer to the surface. That's when you apply milky spore. And you apply it either before it rains, or if it's a dry spell, you can water it in lightly. And again, all the label directions must be followed to the letter. Then we have spinosad. This is a mixture of two bacteria, spinosin A and spinosin D. Both are nerve poison and a stomach poison. So they work on contact or if it's eaten. And because it's a nerve poison, it causes the muscles to flex uncontrollably and leads to paralysis or death in 1 to 2 days. It does break down quickly in sunlight. So you have about 2 to 16 days on the leaves. You do want to spray in the evening to avoid sunlight. And you want to do it when there's little to no wind so that you're not blowing it in your own face and blowing it somewhere where you don't intend to spray it. It's a broad spectrum control. So it's effective against thrips and leaf miners, spider mites, mosquitoes, ants, fruit flies, and others. It is toxic to bees when it is wet, which is also why we want to spray it in the evening, because in the evenings, the bees have returned to their hives. So you wait for the bees to be home, and then you spray it, and preferably when it's still, right? So you're not spraying everything in creation. And so you don't get it in your eyes or on your skin because it can irritate you. So be careful with it. Fungi, many are naturally found in the soil. They also help support plant growth and they break down and decompose things. Fungi infect with contact, so they don't need to be consumed by the pest. They're effective against soft-bodied pests like beetle larvae and caterpillars, right? The young, but they're also effective against soft-bodied adults, aphids and thrips, whiteflies, and chinch bugs. The spores are sensitive to UV light, so you want to apply fungi late in the afternoon or evening or on cloudy days. Now, here's an example of one, this Beauveria bassiana. And the life cycle is this. We start at number 1 with the caterpillar on the left. The fungus has grown, and now it's releasing its spores. And the spores go through the air and maybe land on this caterpillar, or maybe it just happens upon them. And what happens is the egg hatches, the larva gets inside the caterpillar, it kills the caterpillar, and then it starts a whole new life cycle because it sprouts the spores. Now, what does this look like? It looks like the caterpillar is encased in little white cotton. So if you see a caterpillar, I think this is a tent caterpillar, that looks like this, you don't kill it because you want this fungus life cycle to continue. Here's a picture of it on a stink bug. Now, I was really surprised to see this because the stink bug has, the marmorated stink bug has a hard exoskeleton. It has this hard shell, but somehow the fungus managed to find some soft spots to get in. And here's a Colorado potato beetle infected. So I would leave that alone if I saw it. And here's one of my favorites, the spotted lanternfly. It got it. So here's another fungus that's specific to spongy moths, which we used to call gypsy moths. Now we call them spongy moths. There are no commercial products yet, but I wanted to share this one to show you that there's always ongoing research. So just because there's nothing now doesn't mean there's nothing coming. Now here's a picture of a healthy spongy moth. And here's a picture of the spongy moth cadaver. What happens is when the fungus attacks it, it attaches its tail section to the tree, the fungus eats it and kills it, and it just hangs there. There also, I saw pictures of it just hanging loose from a tree branch. So you won't be able to find this now, but maybe in the near future when they can commercialize it, we'll be able to find this. Are there any questions on the biological controls?
No, somebody's asking a brand name of the Bavaria Bassiana, but I think I just did a Google search and a lot came up. Amazon, like I think it's sold as Bavaria, but there's also some other names. So just do a simple Google search and you could find how to buy it.
Right. And in your handout, you have all the Latin names so you can search easily.
Yeah. And how is the fungus introduced as a control?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it's a spray, sometimes it's a powder. It depends on the particular product you're talking about.
Right.
With any of them, whether it's a spray or a powder, you want to be careful to use it on a still day so that you know exactly where you're applying it. It doesn't drift and you don't get it on yourself. So your own safety is really important.
Great. All right, Jane, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. So the last part are the chemical controls. And our strategy here is to use them as an absolute last resort when all else has failed. We've got 4 categories of controls. We can mix and match them, right? Because we're integrating our pest control management. And so hopefully you don't ever have to get to this point. But if you do, we start with the safest and the least toxic product. Give that a chance, see how it works. If we have to up our game, we do, but we try to stay with the safest and least toxic. We also need to be certain that we've correctly identified the pest, so we're using the right product, and that its current life cycle stage has been correctly identified. So if we try and use something that only works on larvae, we're not spraying it on an adult, okay? And we want to use a very targeted, focused spot treatment. We're not going to cover spray. We're not going to do like an automatic sprinkler and just spray it everywhere because it could blow into our own face and hurt us. So I cannot emphasize this enough. The label is the law. You always must read, understand, and follow label directions. If you ever have any questions, please call the Master Gardeners or call the number on the label. You can call the manufacturer. Safe storage is a must. We must keep all of these away from children and our pets. So the best thing is not to even have them, but if you must, make sure you store them high up and away. Okay, here are the 3 kinds of chemical controls used most often in the home landscape. Herbicides to manage weeds, like the poison ivy on the left. Insecticides to manage insects, like the acrobat ant pictured on the right. And fungicides to manage fungi, like the picture on the bottom. All right, now let's go through these very carefully. Here are our insecticidal chemical controls, excuse me. We have insecticidal soaps, and this list is from least toxic on the top down to the more toxic on the bottom. Insecticidal soaps, horticultural oils, neem oil, pyrethrin, and pyrethroids. The pictures on here on the right, these are just examples of how you might find them in the garden and home centers. I'm not endorsing any particular product, but this is how they come. So these are all in spray bottles and in concentrated form that you then mix up with water. So insecticidal soap. This is specially formulated for use on plants. Please do not use your dish detergent, even though it might look the same, because dish detergent can damage your plants. Insecticidal soaps are made from fatty acids and potassium salts. They work by disrupting the cell membranes and dehydrating the pest. So it must come in contact with the pest, right? It can't just be somewhere in the air. You've got to get the pest. It's effective against soft body pests, eggs, and larvae. And it's a broad spectrum control because of look at all the different kinds of insects it will be effective against. All right. When we apply it, we're going to apply it when there is low to no wind. That's to be sure it comes in contact with the insect that you're trying to control. It needs to dry quickly so that we don't burn the leaves. So we're going to apply it early in the morning to avoid strong sun. And we're going to avoid cloudy days because we want to make sure it dries quickly. And remember to spray under the leaf. Turn over the leaves or look underneath. That's where the insects are going to be. Horticultural oils are most of them are made from mineral oil. And this works by interfering with the respiration and membrane function of the pest. And it must also come in contact with the pest. These, again, are most effective on the young, soft-bodied, and slow-moving insects. Slow-moving because you're trying to spray it on the pest. And if it's flying all around, it's hard to get to. So these are effective on mites, aphids, only the crawler stage of scale, because that's when it's soft-bodied. It's effective against adelgids, spider mites, and egg stages. It's less effective on mature insects. All right. Now, this is going to look very familiar. We apply when there is low to no wind to be sure it comes in contact with the insect because we're doing a very targeted spray. It needs to dry quickly to avoid leaf burn, so we'll apply in the early morning and we'll avoid cloudy days. Neem oil is an extract of the leaves and seeds of the neem tree, which is a tree that's native to South Asia and parts of India. It reduces insect feeding and interferes with the hormonal system, so it starves the insect and it hampers egg production. If you can eradicate the eggs, you've gotten rid of the next generation. It's effective against aphids, whiteflies, spider mites, and mosquito larvae. It has the added advantage of repelling adult insects. I think they just don't like the smell. But now I think you can say this along with me. You apply when there's low to no wind So it comes in contact with the insect and goes exactly where you intend it to go. And it needs to dry quickly to avoid leaf burn. So we apply early in the morning, and we avoid cloudy days to make sure that it dries quickly. Now, pyrethrin. It's a natural toxic component found in the pyrethrum flower, which is in the chrysanthemum family. It must come in contact with the insect because it works by affecting the nervous system, causing paralysis and death. It's effective on ants, mosquitoes, moths, flies, and fleas. It breaks down quickly in sunlight, but we need to be careful with pyrethrin, even though it's a naturally found toxic component in a flower, because it kills beneficials. So we don't want to go to pyrethrins first. Pyrethroids are a synthetic human-made pesticide that's made to mimic the natural pyrethrum. It's more toxic to insects and mammals, including you and me, and it typically lasts longer in the environment. I found this fascinating. I did not know this. There are more than 1,000 pyrethroids that have been developed, but less than a dozen are used in the US. Many are banned. Permethrin is the most commonly used in the US. This kills a really broad range of insects, fleas, ticks, cockroaches, flies, and mosquitoes, but it also kills beneficial insects. So we really want to avoid pyrethroids if and whenever possible. There are more, before I get to questions, let me just say there are more toxic options out there. I'm not covering them because I really hope you don't use them. But if you ever have problems, please contact your master gardeners in your local area, and they can help you solve your problems. Are there any other questions for this section, Diane?
No, there isn't.
Okay, well then I'd like to thank you all for your attention and thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it back to Debbie.
Thank you, Jane. A wealth of information, as always.
Oh
We
my goodness, I
learned
just
a lot.
disappeared again. Hold on.
Okay,
I don't know why my computer's doing this. I'm sorry. I'll get it back, but you keep going. There we go.
okay,
Hold on. I'll get you.
okay. Well, thank you all for being here. If you have any questions about our coffee talks, you can email me at dl1008, and that's your email address. What I'm going to put for you in the chat room right now, because I am able to chat, is the link to next week's coffee talk if you haven't already registered. And if you are a resident of Monmouth County, you can always call us or email us with questions. The email address is shown there, and residents of other states and other counties in New Jersey, contact your local county cooperative extension office. And just as a reminder, as soon as the website webinar ends, a survey will pop up in your browser. So please take a minute to answer a few questions for us. It really helps us. So any more questions for Jane, Diane, before we leave?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. No, everybody's loving your talk. So Jane, great job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great job, Jane, and I will stop